Greetings and welcome back. It's your host, Gabe Morales. Today we're going to talk about Chinese triads, both overseas and here in the United States. I've always loved Asian and Pacific Islander culture. I grew up in the diverse city of Seattle and lived for almost 10 years, greater LA area, as well as Sacramento, California, and frequently visited San Francisco's Bay Area, including San Francisco's Chinatown and the lesser known Oakland's Chinatown. I've also visited New York's Chinatown along Canal Street several times, so I became very familiar with Chinese food, music, dance, and culture. I currently live in the state of Hawaii, which has a Chinese culture in combination with other Asian and Pacific Islander cultures. I have interviewed several Triad members as well as Chinese street gangs. Over the years, I learned from subject matter experts like David Chan, Dan Foley, Marcus Frank, and Ed Yee, and Na Wang Sandoval, who is an expert on Asian organized crime, who I believe still teaches at the University of Colorado, and who I brought in for a class to teach students at the Washington Criminal Justice Training Center. And I've given many seminars across the United States, including the California Asian Gang Investigators Association, as well as doing a presentation on triads at the Oklahoma Gang Investigators Association, a state which has been bombarded by triads in recent years, as we soon shall see. Last I checked, the People's Republic of China stood at almost 1.5 billion people, while the independent island of Taiwan had a population of approximately 25 million, or about equal to the population of the state of Florida. Chinese Americans are the largest Asian group in the United States, making up approximately 1/4 of the Asian population, or approximately 5.5 million people. As I go through this video, we should remember, just like in my other videos, 99% of the population are not criminals. In fact, Asian Americans, including Chinese Americans, are some of the most law-abiding people in the U.S. But today we're going to talk about that other 1%. In order to understand triads, we have to go back in history and understand that several walls were built to protect against invading armies in China as early as the 7th century BC, with several stretches being later joined together by Qing Shi Huang, who is the first recognized emperor of China, around the years 2020 to 206 BC. Today, little of the Qing walls remain. Later on, many successive dynasties built and maintained multiple stretches of border walls. The best known sections are the Great Wall, built by the Ming Dynasty from 1368 to 1644. The Forbidden City and the capital of Peking, or Beijing, was constructed from 1406 to 1420. It was the Chinese imperial palace and winter residence of the Emperor of China from the Ming dynasties until the last Qing dynasty of 1924. A Wangwu emperor named Zhu Wengzwang ruled for 30 years as the founder of the Ming dynasty. He proclaimed the mandate of heaven, which meant that the emperor was considered God. Regular people could not even look at him. If they criticized him, they were often sentenced to death, and massacres of entire villages were very common. The Tiandihui, or Heaven and Earth Society, also known as the Hongmen, or Vast Family, was a secret fraternal society of Ming Dynasty loyalists, also called the White Lotus sect. They branched into several smaller groups with different names, one of which was the Three Harmony Society. According to legend, there was a Shaolin temple who practiced the martial arts of Kung Fu and were very good at it. Eventually, word reached the emperor, who felt they were a threat to his rule. So he sent his army in to massacre everybody in the Shaolin temple and burned it to the ground. All were killed, allegedly, except 5 Shaolin monks. These are referred to as being the 5 ancestors. These monks went off to different parts of China and allegedly started the roots of the Hong Society, which were Ming Dynasty followers who had the intent of overthrowing the Qing Dynasty, who were mostly Manchurians, whereas the Ming Dynasty was mostly Han, which is the majority of Chinese. These Hmong Society followers came up with a saying, Fan Qing Fu Ming, which basically means overthrow the Qing, restore the Ming. This phrase is still often used today by Triad members' initiation. Hmong Society remained a patriotic organization for the most part until, in the Qing dynasty, outlawed the use of opium, and at the time, opium use was widespread. This provided an opportunity for the Triads to smuggle in illegal opium to inner cities all over China, as many of the farmer peasants were forced into the bigger cities due to famine, discrimination, and repression by the Qing regime. Much of this opium was brought in by British merchant ships, whose ships also brought in other items into China. And there became a lot of tension between the Qing government and the British government, to the point where finally the British took over Hong Kong and used it as a major import station for their goods. At the same time, Shanghai also became controlled by various triad groups. Triads' aims have varied over the years. Basically, there were two major types of triads. There were dark forces, or loosely organized groups, and black societies, which were more mature, more organized criminal groups. Two features which distinguished a black society member from a dark force was the ability to achieve illegal control over local markets and receiving police protection for it. Hong Kong Triad refers to traditional criminal organizations operating in or originating from the cities of Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan, and other Southeast Asian countries and regions, while organized crime groups in mainland China are referred to as being mainland Chinese criminal groups. These triads had a leader, often called the Dragon Head or Mountain Master. They also had an operations officer or vanguard, a master mountain deputy, and an incense master who oversaw ceremonies for the triad. There also were administrators, sometimes referred to as white paper fund, enforcers called red pole, and liaison officers, also referred to as straw sandal. Underneath this hierarchy were 49ers, who were considered to be ordinary members, and blue lanterns, who were probationary, uninitiated members. They had secret handshakes, and you could tell what rank the individual was by their handshake. Triad leaders today will often look just like regular businessmen. And today, many of these old ranks are gone. Only the top guy or general, the soldiers, the 49ers, or Blue Lanterns, or probationary prospect remain today in many triads. The main rule is the boss is to be obeyed at all times. As the triads spread through different countries and provinces, they branched off into different rival groups. Some of these societies adopted the triangle as their emblem, usually accompanied by decorative images of swords or portraits of Wang Yu, who was a general that died in 2020 AD and served under the warlord Li Wei in the late Eastern Han Dynasty. If you've ever noticed, often just inside the door of Chinese businesses, even today, you'll see statues of Wang Yu that are meant to protect businesses and ward off evil. They'll often also have a Buddha statue, which many people rub and is said to give customers good luck. The presence of statues of Wang Yu or the Buddha does not mean the business is controlled by triads or organized crime. However, triads and Chinese organized crime often pay homage to Wang Yu. In fact, a typical triad initiation ceremony takes place at an altar with a statue of Wang Yu and incense, as well as often an animal sacrifice, usually a chicken, pig, or goat. After drinking a mixture of wine and blood from the animal, the member passes beneath an arch of swords while reciting that particular triad's oath. The paper on which the oaths are written will be burnt at the altar to confirm the member's obligations to perform his duties to the triad and to the gods. The Taiping Rebellion was a civil war in China between the Manchu-led Qing dynasty and the Hakang-led Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. The conflict lasted approximately 14 years, 1850 until 1864. However, their last rebel forces were not defeated until 1871. Estimates of the conflict's death toll range between 20 to 30 million people, representing 5 to 10% of China's entire population at the time. The uprising was led by Emperor Hong, proclaimed himself to be the brother of Jesus Christ. Hong sought the religious conversion of the Han people to his version of Christianity, as well as the political overthrow of the Qing dynasty. Taiping rebels sought to entirely upend the country's social order at the time. The Taiping Heavenly Kingdom was located in Nanjing and controlled a significant portion of southern China during that time period. At its peak, the Heavenly Kingdom ruled over a population of nearly 30 million people. Taiping soldiers carried out widespread massacres of rival Manchus, the ethnic minority of the ruling imperial house. Meanwhile, the Qing government also engaged in massacres, most notably against the civilian population of Nanjing. The 14-year civil war as a whole coincided with internal and external conflicts of the Opium Wars and of the future Boxer Rebellion that further weakened the Qing dynasty's grasp on China. One of the first well-documented triads was the Green Gang, which originally was a salt smuggling group that existed along the many canals that operated out of Shanghai during the 1800s. But later on, they also moved into opium smuggling. Some of the leaders of the Green Gang were Yuesheng and Wang Zhurong, who, besides opium, also were involved in controlling gambling rackets and prostitution. The Green Gang also supported Chiang Kai-shek and his brother-in-law, TV Sung, who were very involved in China's Civil War that started in 1927 and ended in the creation of the People's Republic of China under Chairman Mao Zedong. There is also said to have been a Red Gang and Blue Gang factions. Some say that these three groups is where the definition triad actually came from. I've also heard some triad members state that term stood for the three big rivers in China: the Changjiang or Yangtze River, the Wanghe or Yellow River, and the Qijiang or Pearl River. But the majority of triads operated out of Hong Kong, so I'm not sure about that. The location of Hong Kong is not close to the other two river systems. It is located in southern China, although the waters west of Hong Kong are influenced by the Pearl River. After 1949, the gang fled to Hong Kong and later split into several different criminal organizations, also called triads. Under British rule of Hong Kong from 1841 to 1997, all Chinese secret societies were collectively seen as being criminal threats and were bundled together and defined as triads, which is now synonymous with Chinese organized crime. But in reality, there was a lot of variation on how they evolved. The Boxer Rebellion was an anti-British colonial, anti-Christian uprising in China between 1899 and 1901. Towards the end of the Qing dynasty, Boxer rebels were often called the Militia United in Righteousness, or just Boxers in English, because many of its members had practiced in Chinese martial arts, also sometimes referred to as Chinese boxing. Other occupations also had influence, like kitchen workers, butchers, cleavers, which were often used as weapons, and the assassins were sometimes called hatchet men. Chinese secret organization called the Society of the Righteous and Harmonious Fists also participated against the spread of Western and Japanese influences. As the situation grew more and more violent, a multinational force of 2,000 sailors and Marines under the command of British Vice Admiral Edward Seymour were dispatched from Daegu to Beijing. And in the summer of 1900, the Boxers besieged the foreign district of Beijing until an international force that included American troops subdued the uprising. This is referred to as the Boxer Rebellion. By the terms of the Boxer Protocol, which officially ended the rebellion in 1901, China agreed to pay more than $330 million in reparation to foreign governments. The Chinese, especially the Triads, never forgave these foreigners. By 1912, Triads were no longer considered protective or defensive organizations and had become full-fledged criminal organizations, and they expanded their operations worldwide. After the Boxer Rebellion, China was in great turmoil, and General Sun Yat-sen, who was a Chinese statesman, physician, and political philosopher, served as the first provincial president of the Republic of China after the overthrow of the emperor, and was considered to be the first leader of the Kuomintang, or National Party of China. He is also called the father of the nation, both in the Republic of China and in Taiwan, for his role in overthrowing the Qing dynasty and changing enormous political influence that the emperor had over the people of China. Dr. Sun Yat-sen used these triads to leverage his overseas travels to gain further financial support resources for his revolution via his main general, Chiang Kai-shek. An interesting point I'd like to interject here is that Sun Yat-sen left his village in Guangdong, located in the southern part of China, 1879, to join a brother in the then Kingdom of Hawaii, still ruled by British law. He eventually returned to China and moved to Hong Kong in 1883. Sun Yat-sen had support from many places, including a wealthy farmer named Teng Yin-nan and his Honolulu-based triad, the Splendid Equality Society. Tang sold his businesses and sailed for Hong Kong to support Sun Yat-sen's revolutionary movement. It was there that he was exiled and led a movement to overthrow the Chinese emperor, whose government finally fell in 1912. You ever seen the movie The Last Emperor? It shows Emperor Puyi, who was briefly placed back into power by the Japanese from 1934 to 1945, and just before the end of World War II. A few triads actually worked with the Japanese. These were often referred to as the Asian Flourishing Organization, and they combined forces against anti-Japanese triads. The AFO also ran brothels for Japanese soldiers, with Chinese prostitutes servicing them. They also controlled other vices like opium dens, but most Chinese seen him as irrelevant and being just a Japanese puppet. During this time period, the Triads were often seen as warriors against the corrupt emperor and against the Japanese. April 12, 1927, Yuesheng and his Green Gang support routed the Communist Army in Shanghai. This is often referred to as being the Shanghai Massacre. After that point, Yuesheng became probably the strongest triad leader in all of China. Yu then became a nationalist hero and became part of this elite and had his hand in politics as well as commerce. He formed his own bank and sat on the Shanghai Stock Exchange, part of the Shanghai Chamber of Commerce, the Shanghai Red Cross, and sat on the board of the Bank of China. In 1937, however, during the Japanese occupation of Shanghai, Du was forced to flee the city, which was virtually his kingdom. After the Japanese were defeated, Du returned to Shanghai, but 5 years later, the city fell again, this time to Mao Zedong's Communist Party. Du was then able to escape to Hong Kong, but Du died of opium-induced illness in 1951, and so ended the era of one of the most powerful triad leaders to ever live. Because of their involvement in the overthrowing of the emperor, for many years there was a strong tolerance by governments both in Taiwan and in mainland China for secret societies to do their dirty work. But triad members are also sometimes charged and imprisoned in Hong Kong, which was still under British Crown law at that time. After World War II, these societies saw a resurgence in gangsters who took advantage of the uncertainty and growing anti-British sentiment. The end of the World War II era and the start of the People's Communist Party of China entered a new era for the Triads, and many had to flee to Hong Kong or to Taiwan. And so I'm going to have to stop right there. You can find more information on the Chinese Triads and other Asian organized crime groups in my book, Asian and Pacific Islander Gangs, available on Amazon.com. When we return, we'll cover the Triads after World War II. I hope you enjoyed this episode and learned something new. For now, this is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.